All right, I think I got that part mastered.
Dennis, I think you got the go ahead to start if you wish.
Okay, very good. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today at our session. My name is Dennis Desai. I'm an appraiser out of Northern California, and I do both residential and commercial work. The reason that I was asked to come out here is because, probably as most of you know, California has been very aggressive in implementing what I would call, as a real estate observer, very flexible ADU development regulations. And in fact, you would be hard pressed in California to find a single family residential property that didn't qualify for ADU development under the new state laws. And it's been evolving over the last few years. In the beginning, it was focused on residential units, single family residential units with one ADU. Now it has evolved into single family residential units can have up to 2 ADUs. There's a slight nuance in how they define the second one. It's called a junior ADU out here, but the concept is still the same. It's an ADU. So single family residences can have 2 ADUs. Multifamily in the residential category, as we call them, 2 to 4s, can have up to 2 ADUs. So, you know, intuitively, you might think, gee, I can transform my duplex into a 4-plex by adding 2 units. And on some levels, it does look that way. On other levels, it's not that simple when it comes to the valuation component. So what I'm talking about today is what I call the ADU wave, and changes in the financing and the challenges in the valuation. So let's put my presentation up there, and I'm assuming everybody can see it. So my disclaimer, hey, these are my opinions. Not only am I an appraiser, I also develop courses, continuing education courses for California appraisers on ADU and most recently rent control. I've also developed a national course, which is eligible for continuing education in many states. And along with my appraiser hat, I'm also a consultant. I work with a local ADU developer here in California, and we're working on various projects on the valuation aspect of ADUs. So I wanted to start out because if anybody was in yesterday's presentation where Abdur participated, and there was a lot of good information there, and some of it might be duplicated here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what the duplication is, but I added some new information. If anybody has downloaded the presentation, the first 6 slides will not be part of that. If you email me, I'm happy to give you the most recent and updated slide package. So this information comes from I'll call it a think tank at UC Berkeley that focuses on affordable housing and the shifts in the communities and affordable housing, because in California, we do have an affordable housing problem. The ADU law was thought to be one method to address that. This was a survey that came out just a couple months ago. They sent out 15,000 plus surveys to owners of ADUs, new ADUs, and about 5% responded. Not a bad rate. I mean, that's the same if you send out coupons for a free meal, you get a 5% return on that, and that's considered successful. So let's look at some of the numbers that this most recent survey came up with. When we talk about the physical ADU characteristics, 97% of the respondents have only one ADU on the property, even though in California, you can have two. If you work it right, the vast majority are going with one. 53% of the new ADUs are detached. That's kind of interesting because the detached ADU is the more expensive as a rule than repurposing existing space, the garage conversion, but half of them are detached. The average size is 615 square feet. 61% are one bedrooms, 18% are studios, and the rest 2 bedrooms or more. This is an interesting statistic when we come to family size affordability. The construction characteristics, median statewide is $150,000 for an ADU or $250 a square foot, but that varies with region. So the region that I'm in is the most expensive, and that's in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. The least costly is San Diego. And then, typically in the higher density urban areas such as LA, the cost is higher. Out in what we call the Central Valley, which would be more a rural type of market, it's a little less expensive, but San Diego is the cheapest. But 150,000 is the median cost for an ADU. 37% cost less than 100,000. So when I originally spoke with Sherry in participating in this event, being on the East Coast, at first there was somewhat of a sticker shock when we were talking about how much it costs to build an ADU out here. And I believe in the opening presentation yesterday, June, the architect from Oakland, made it a point to say, these are California dollars. So I want to make that same point. These are California dollars, but 30% costs less than 100,000. And out here, that's in many people's affordable reach. And these are probably repurposed space, a garage conversion, something like that. 71% costs less than 200,000. So while those numbers may sound huge, that's approaching affordability out here on the West Coast. The study found, with regard to the financing characteristics, here's how it was broken down. And I think this is a very important and relevant concern to most of the participants in this event, because everybody's wondering, how are we going to pay to build these ADUs? Well, the survey said that 53% paid cash. I can tell you for a fact, if I wanted to build an ADU, I could not pay cash. I would have to go out and finance. So 53 paid cash, 43% obtained a bank loan, 10% got friends and relatives to help them out. Hey, Dennis, if I add up those numbers, I'm getting 106%. What's going on here? It's a combination, right? I paid cash and some of it came from my friends. I got a bank loan and some of that money also came from friends. So that's how that works. Rental characteristics. Now, as a appraiser and an observer of rental trends in California, I actually found this number very surprising. And it was 51% of the new ADUs are rentals. I really didn't think it would be that high a number. And I think it surprised me, and I believe it surprised a lot of people in our industry. The fact of the matter is, and I make this point at the end, is that ADUs are an emerging trend, and the market is ahead of both the valuation and the financing component. So I looked at this, I'm surprised. I would think that most people would build these ADUs and maybe use it for themselves. No, half are looking as income generation, and that's important. 8% of the new ADUs are short-term rentals. We do have a number of regulations in place that limit the short-term rental opportunities in many jurisdictions. The idea here was not to create hotels. The idea here was to add to the housing stock, and under the theory that the more housing we're able to add, the prices come down and it becomes more affordable. 86% of the state's renter-occupied ADUs have just 1 or 2 occupants. So it's not a family size rental. Remember, the median size was somewhere around 600 square feet and was a 1-bedroom. So ADUs do offer an opportunity to add to the housing stock, but they're not family size orientated, and it kind of makes sense. I have appraised properties with a 1,200 square foot ADU, and those 1,200 square foot ADUs, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, can, serve for family. Most of those larger ADUs are in the higher income demographic neighborhoods, and so affordable housing out in the high end really isn't what those ADUs are serving. But these are the statistics. Rental characteristics: 11% of new ADUs provide housing for school-aged children. So they're not family friendly, but a single parent or even a couple with a child can use ADUs, 10% of them. 15% of new ADUs provide housing for senior citizens. That was also one of the impetuses for the flexibility in the rules, aging in place. So if my parents were slowing down and could no longer manage their household, I can build the ADU and bring them to me and I can manage them. And 15% of the ADUs are seeing that. For tenant occupied ADUs, 40% of the tenants do not park cars on the street. I think that's really interesting, because a lot of the pushback to adding density to a neighborhood is, where are they going to park? And I live in a single family neighborhood. I got a 2-car garage. I have my kids at home. I have 5 cars at my house right now. So parking is a concern, and parking was a concern when the ADU regulation went into effect. But here the numbers look, almost half don't even park, and the rest only have 1 car. So the impact on parking wasn't as significant as some had feared. Rental rates and affordability. So the median rental rate is $2,000, and low of $1,900 in the Central Coast to a high of $2,200 in the San Francisco Bay Area. Bear in mind, that's the median. So that's the point right in the middle. ADU rent per square foot for the state is $3.68. Affordability. So the study said affordability varies by region. We get that. The median rental price of an ADU is affordable. It's less than 30% of the household income to the median household of 2 people in San Francisco and Central Coast regions. Well, okay, it's affordable if I'm a 2-income household, but if I'm below the area median income, the 80%, then all of a sudden, a lot of these ADUs in those areas may not be affordable. So that is also a concern that the policymakers are looking at. Here is the studies. It's a summary, but it says going forward, which I thought was very relevant to the presentation and the audience here. So I wanted to repeat it. And what the study says is ADUs do provide relatively affordable rental housing for Californians, but there are still significant barriers. This survey suggests that despite the legislative reforms, the ADU revolution has been slow to reach low-income homeowners of color. It will take targeted effort to meaningfully boost ADU production so that all Californians can reap the benefits. And my observation of the market is that that is true. ADU development is going gung-ho in a lot of the middle to upper income bands of the market. And while it's happening, it's not happening at the same pace in the lower middle to lower income bands of the market, an area where the legislation was definitely targeted to focus. I have worked and spoken to various groups here, nonprofits, to talk about the valuation challenges, and we'll go into that next. But that's a problem here, and it's a concern, I believe, from what I was hearing from the speakers yesterday. So this is a problem that we jointly share, and I think by putting everybody's mind together, we can probably come up with some good solutions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the lending, and I'm not going to go spend a lot of time on this because it was covered very well yesterday. I want to talk about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So if you don't know, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're the 800-pound gorillas. They're the big policy makers on the block when it comes to residential mortgage finance. They don't make direct loans. They buy loans from lenders who make the loans. And so what they have is what they call their selling guide and guidelines. There are some rules which are clear cut, and I'm going to talk about them. It has to do with eligibility of the property for the loan. So if the property isn't eligible, that's not a guideline. It can't get the loan. There are other items which are suggestions or guidelines, which in the ideal world we might be able to hit, but it's flexible. And part of the friction that has occurred, especially with ADUs, is that lenders and appraisers are somewhat locked into the thought that, well, the guideline is a requirement. And Abdur talked about this yesterday very well. No, the guideline is guidance. And there are exceptions to the guidelines. But when you make an exception, when you do something that isn't expected, then what is expected is for some additional support, analysis, and discussion. So that is the challenge that we're having. And let's see. What qualifies as an ADU? Typically, it must be subordinate to the primary dwelling. If my house is 2,000 square feet, I can't have a 2,500 square foot ADU. These are Fannie Mae's selling guides. So these aren't guidelines. This says must. This is a requirement. It must have the following separate features from the primary dwelling. It's got to have its own way to get in and out. You can't go through the main house to get to an ADU as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac define it. It's got to have a kitchen. It's got to have a sleeping area. Doesn't need a bedroom. You can have studios, right? Needs a bathing area and bathroom facility. It does need a bath. And they specifically say, hey, you know what? You don't need to have interior access. But if it can only be accessed through the primary dwelling unit, then there is, or if there is an area open to the primary dwelling unit, there's no expectation of privacy. It doesn't qualify as an ADU. Why is this important? Because local zoning jurisdictions might have a different definition of an ADU. So if the local jurisdiction defines an ADU as, hey, you can have all this and you can go through the main house if it's attached, we don't have a problem with that. The lending definition would be in conflict. Although it's permitted as an ADU, it wouldn't qualify as an ADU amenity in lending. These are a little, I don't want to categorize them as nuanced differences because they're significant, right? They change the characteristic of this component based on the financing eligibility. Well, gee, Dennis, what are you telling us? Are you telling us if I spend $150,000 and I happen to have only one way in and that's through the main house, that's not worth anything? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is it's not an ADU for Fannie and Freddie financing purposes. And as a rule, FHA and VA follow suit. And where it's important is even non-Fannie and Freddie lenders many times look to their guidelines as their lending requirements as well. What was encouraging yesterday was hearing lenders who say, hey, look, we know this. Yes, this is our guidelines and we follow suit here. But we also have alternative programs where we can be more flexible. Those are the programs that if I'm an ADU developer, I want to make sure that I tap into or have access to, because sometimes going the conventional route is going to be challenging. Let's go on. Kitchen. Oh, and the kitchen. What constitutes a kitchen? This is mostly common sense stuff. It's got to be a functional kitchen. But 2 points that Fannie Mae makes is, look, just because you got a second kitchen in a house, that doesn't mean it's an ADU. And the other thing they say is, hey, you know what? If you have an ADU and it just you took out the stove, don't try to categorize it as something other than an ADU. It's an ADU. It just doesn't have its stove. So it'd be the house. Hey, that's a house. It just doesn't have a stove. If I'm missing the stove in the house, that doesn't become something else. Modular versus manufactured. Anybody that was in the this opening discussion yesterday with and again, I hope I have her name right, June from Oakland. I should make contact with her because we're almost neighbors here. She was talking about the process that they use where they had their skilled trades offsite in a warehouse, constructing components, and then they would bring it out to the site and assemble it there. That's modular housing. That's what that is. So when I construct components off-site and then bring them on-site and assemble them, and they meet the local building codes, that's a modular construction, and it's considered a traditional stick and brick house. A manufactured home is what we would call a HUD manufactured home as a rule, and that is your home that is manufactured 100% off-site. It is trucked to the site and it's attached to the site via a permanent foundation. But it does not have to meet local building codes. It meets HUD FHA manufactured house standards. No local building codes. Why is that important? It's kind of important for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and perhaps some other lenders, because modular constructed ADUs are fine. For GSE, I will refer to Fannie and Freddie as GSE's financing. But a manufactured house as an ADU, it'll work if and only if the primary house is a traditional stick and brick / modular home. So the primary house has to meet local building codes. And then the ADU can be a manufactured house that meets HUD standards. Okay. Permitted ADU versus finance ADU. Well, the local jurisdictions have their definition of what is permitted and what constitutes an ADU. As I said earlier, Fannie and Freddie have their own definitions. So for financing purposes, it's not so much what the permit says, it's what actually exists versus their definition. Right now, Fannie Mae will loan on a single family house with one ADU. They will not loan on a single family house with two ADUs. And that's why it's very important to understand what their definition is. As I said, in California, you could have something that is permitted as a junior ADU, but it doesn't meet the Fannie Mae definition. So in that case, if I had the one ADU and the JADU, I'm fine, because that JADU permitted as an ADU, junior ADU, doesn't meet Fannie's definition. If it does, though, not eligible for a loan. And for 2 to 4 properties, it's real simple. Currently, they will not loan on a duplex, triplex, or fourplex if there's an ADU. Not nowhere, not know how. Alternative financing. ADU appraisal requirements really boil down to 2 things, especially with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but this is true for all lenders. First thing is that they want us to demonstrate that these things are marketable. So it kind of makes intuitive sense to us that if I'm in an urban area and there's affordable housing issues and I build an ADU, gee, wouldn't that add value to our property? We would think so intuitively, but the appraisal is required to demonstrate that through market data. The other thing is, okay, yes, these things are in demand in the market. Then what's the adjustment? Does it contribute value? And this is where a lot of the friction occurs between appraisals, lenders, developers, and homeowners, because the valuation of the ADU isn't necessarily as simple as some of the other things that we routinely value. It used to be that you had to have 2 or 3 comps with an ADU. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac has relaxed that. Now you only need 1 comparable, something that's similar to the subject, and it has an ADU. My subject has an ADU. Gee, look, down the block, here's another house that kind of matches the primary and it has an ADU. It's marketable. They're in the market. ADUs are such an emerging trend in some jurisdictions that, I built an ADU, but who's going to spend $150,000 to $200,000 building an ADU and then selling it within 6 months after they build it? That's not my plan. And that's not most people's plan. Investors might, but a typical homeowner is not going to spend this money and then try to cash out. That's an investment play, not an owner-user play. So while permits and building activity and the demand for financing to pay for that activity is like blowing up, it's exploding. What we don't have in a lot of markets are the sales transactions to test how much value these things are awarded in the market. It's a challenge. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac said, okay, look, Dennis, maybe you can't find that perfect comp down the street with an ADU. Tell you what, you can demonstrate marketability if within the market that you're at, within that area, doesn't have to be a comp to the primary, but can you show us at least, is there something out there with ADUs? Can you at least satisfy us that it exists? An example would be if I had a 2,000 square foot house, I might look at a house that's up to 25, maybe 2,600 square feet as a comparable. That's pushing it, but maybe, let's just go with it. Probably wouldn't go any lower if I can avoid it than 1,700 square feet, because you get different buyer profiles when you start changing square footage on that scale. I would never use a 3,800 square foot home as a comparable sale to my 2,000 square foot home. Wouldn't do it. The adjustments that I would need to apply to that are not the same as I would need to apply to similar homes. But what Fannie is saying, okay, look, you don't have to use it as a comparable. We get that. In fact, we agree with you. But if it has an ADU, you can use that to demonstrate marketability in the neighborhood. So that's a big help for appraisers. We're not necessarily locked into finding a comparable to the primary. We just need to demonstrate that ADUs exist, and we can make that demonstration with a house that would be larger than we would normally use, or a house that is smaller than what we would normally use. So there's great help there. The challenge is that when you get something that's dissimilar from the primary, how do we value the ADU? The gold standard is, I got my house and I got the house across the street and I got another house. I got an ADU, the one across the street has an ADU and the other house doesn't. After I compare those two, the one with, the one that without, I should be able to figure out how much contributory value the ADU added. But if I don't have that pair, we call them matched pairs or paired sales, then it becomes a little difficult. One option may be to look at the dissimilar market neighborhood and say, well, gee, in this market, it looks like I can do my pairing because I do have 3,500 square foot homes versus a 3,500 square foot homes with ADUs. And when I look at that, the value difference is 10% of the sale price. That is a good analysis. Still not perfect, because if I'm in the $2.5 million range and it's 10%, would that necessarily apply to the $800,000 range? 10% is $250,000 there. 10% is $80,000 here. So while it's helpful, it's not necessarily ideal. It's a challenge. And that's what this slide talks about. Granny units, in-law units, they've been around, but not like they are now. It's an emerging trend. And I've said this already. And I've just talked about, if you don't have direct comparables, you can use dissimilar sales to support the marketability, but we still have a problem with what's the value. So appraisers will typically use, there's 3 approaches, and then there are some variations. The gold standard is the paired sales. I have a sale with, without, I can figure out the value by matching those 2. What about cost? Cost is a very appropriate technique to try to get a handle on the value of a component. We have a saying that cost doesn't equal value. Without getting too technical, correctly, we would say cost minus depreciation equals value. But just because it costs X doesn't mean it's returned in the marketplace. However, as a rule, the cost might set the upper limit. So for example, if it costs me $150,000 to develop my own ADU, how much would I pay to buy the house with the ADU already developed? Well, I might pay 150. In fact, I might pay a little more because I don't have to go through the hassle. It's done. I can buy it right now. So maybe I'll pay 160 or 165, let's say. I'm not going to pay 250. I'll spend my 150 and wait 6 months to get it done and pocket the 100,000 that it would cost me to buy the other location. So cost, there is an example. It does set an upper boundary in most cases. It's reasonable and it's logical. Surveys. This is something that a lot of appraisers need to get back into the habit. So if I'm out in a neighborhood and I'm doing a unique property, you can bet that I'm calling up agents and brokers and asking them, hey, did your property have this component? If so, how did you price it? How was it received in the market? If you had to price it, that's what my house has. How much of a value would you put on it? You start collecting information. These are market participants. They're in the market all the time. And they make their livelihood on correctly pricing and selling properties. So they're a good source to use. Appraisers need to get in that habit. Income. Everybody always asks me, Dennis, you just told us that 50% of these things are rented in California. Why don't you do an income approach? Okay. Income approach. Why don't I do one? Well, the problem with the income approach for ADUs is this. Remember that an ADU is an accessory to the primary house. So the first thing that we do is we're valuing the primary house. That's the main kit and caboodle right there. When we value that primary house, that includes land value. Then we want to know, how much does this ADU contribute to? When we do an income approach, we're usually comparing rents of a comparable property. And then we go through something that is similar to doing a PE on the stock. We divide the monthly rent by the sales price, and we get a multiplier. And if we do that enough times with comparable rental properties, we can come up with a multiplier that we should apply to our subject. For example, let us assume that the subject could rent for $2,000 a month. And let us assume within this neighborhood, the residential GRM for this type of house is 200. So the house is worth 400,000. 200 times 2,000 is 400,000. Why can't we take that 200 and just apply it to the ADU rent? The reason that we can't do that is because the ADU doesn't have any land. The land has already been accounted for in the value of the house. The ADU does not have a land value. So if we were to apply a house or duplex or triplex multiplier to an ADU, we would be overvaluing it. Dennis, can't you extract? Can't you deduct the value of the land and then come up with something? I could do that. Very complicated, very time consuming. I think it's fair to say that it's beyond what we call the normal scope of work for this type of assignment. I get asked, well, can you apply a cap rate? The cap rate, I could do that, but nobody else uses cap rates except for investors, usually on portfolio properties. And the cap rate still has the same problem. There's land value. So it's not ideal. That's the problem with the income approach. Having said that, however, appraisers should go out and collect rental information about the market. And if the ADU is going to be rented, they should note that, because here's a simple calculation that everybody can understand. Let's say that the ADU cost $150,000, all in, all costs. And let's say that I can rent it out for $1,500 a month. So $1,500 a month is $18,000 a year. Cost me $150,000 to put in. I'm going to recapture on a gross basis, just on the gross rent alone, my investment within 6 to 7 years. And after that, it's all cash, baby. Now, that's not a way to necessarily value a property, but I think it's a persuasive way to support the value of a property. If I go through my cost, if I go through my survey, if I go through comparing to another neighborhood and coming up with a percentage adjustment, I'm going to get different points. I'm going to reconcile. And then I'm going to say, oh, and by the way, if you rent this thing, you're going to get paid back in 6 years. It's a no-brainer. It's persuasive to the lender, because that's who I need to convince. First, I need to convince myself this thing has value. Then I need to know how to get that value, analyze it. Then I need to present it to the lender, because they are going to make the decision. I know it doesn't sound encouraging. The market is significantly in front of the lending and valuation process. Most lenders take their direction from Fannie and Freddie, unless you're a specialty or commercial bank. Fannie and Freddie are beginning to adapt. That is good news. Appraisers take their direction from their clients, the lenders. The lenders are beginning to adapt, but it's a very slow process. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Additional education on the valuation and lending side is necessary, and we're seeing that happen. Good news is, as more ADU transactions happen, this data will start to filter through the market. We won't be scrambling. We'll actually have these ideal gold standard comparable sales. We're not there yet. As of now, the best bet is to find a letter. This is my advice to everybody. I get emails from investors, from people I speak to. Hey, what do you suggest? This is what I tell them. Your best bet is to find a lender who understands ADU dynamic. Then ensure that that lender engages a competent and qualified appraiser who understands the various valuation techniques. This is true if you go for a conventional loan. This is true if you go for a commercial loan. This is true if you get a subsidized nonprofit loan. This is true if you're doing a land trust and it's a leasehold valuation. You need to find competency. Most appraisers are very competent in doing the typical residential mortgage. ADUs, because of the new laws in the various jurisdictions, are no longer typical. They're emerging. You need to find appraisers with that training and special competency. And that's it. I hope that was informative for a lot. And Abdur, did I go over to my time? I better release it to you, right?
Well, thank you, Dennis. Yes, so my name is Abdur Abdul Malik. I am a certified residential appraiser. Some of you might remember me from yesterday's session. And let me go ahead and share my screen so I can bring up my. Can you see my slide, Dennis?
I cannot.
Okay, hold on one second. How about now?
There we go. I got the
Okay.
computer. I don't have the slideshow. I got the.
Okay, let me go ahead and start it from the beginning.
Bingo.
Okay, so Dennis, I always tell people that Dennis is probably one of the smartest appraisers I've ever met. He's very humble. He wouldn't say that himself, but he certainly is. I'm sure you found his presentation to be very persuasive. And his last bullet point on his slide addressed a very important issue when it comes to ADU valuations. You have to get the right appraiser. Now, we love our profession. We have great respect for our colleagues, but we do realize that some people have been legitimately stating that some of the valuation transactions are being derailed by getting the wrong appraiser for the job. And so I just wanted to share with the audience just a few brief slides about finding a good appraiser. This is just about me. Like Dennis, I hold the SRA designation with the Appraisal Institute, and I've been studying ADUs, and I have been getting a lot of stories from various market participants telling me that there have been some difficulties in this area. So we're going to talk about, again, getting the right appraiser. So as Dennis mentioned, ADUs are complex, and sometimes we may find a well-meaning appraiser in a transaction where they're a little bit outside of their depth. Now, it may seem self-evident that you're going to want to get the best appraiser for the job, but part of the problems with this is that many lending institutions have outsourced the ordering of appraisals to third-party intermediaries. Now, these companies are known as appraisal management companies, or AMCs. Some of these AMCs are wonderful to work with. They're professional, they're competent. Their main job as that intermediary is to find a list of appraisers to add to their roster. And when a job comes in from one of their primary lender clients, such as a big bank, a local institution, they'll go ahead and solicit the job to an appraiser on their list. Sounds okay, sounds good, helps maybe keep costs down for the lending institution. But the problem with that is that, number one, not all AMCs are created equal. Some are, as I said, a delight to work for, and others maybe not quite as much of a delight. But there is some tension between the needs of the lender and the goals of the AMC, because as a middleman company, some of their motives may not fully align with the job at hand. Now, typically what happens is an appraisal management company is given a flat fee. The lender may say, I have X dollars to pay you for this job. Please find me an appraiser who will do it for this fee. Well, of course, the AMC is not going to give 100% of the fee that the lender is passing on to them to the appraiser. So they have a motive, shall we say, to solicit the job to someone that will take it for what they feel is a reasonable cut. Now, I can tell you that the appraisers may not feel that their cut is very reasonable. And unfortunately, some of the more shady characters in the business may take so much of the fee that it may actually be more than half. And appraisers who are qualified to handle ADU assignments, professionals, they know their value. They're not going to work for pennies on the dollar. And so those individuals may just simply pass. They may say, this fee is unacceptable, I'm not going to do the work. So you get a Dennis Desai who's teaching this on a national level. He looks at the fee, he says, I'm not taking that. That's not worth my time. I won't even turn my car on for less than X number of dollars to go out to an assignment. So you lose the Dennis Desais of the world, and maybe you get someone who thinks they know what they're doing, but perhaps don't. And so then that's when trouble can happen in the market. So it's really important to understand that if you're outsourcing the acquisition of the appraiser to a third-party intermediary, you may not be dealing with the top of the pool. And this graphic here is a well-known one. I think most of us have seen it in a variety of contexts. You can get something done fast, you can get something done well or good, you can get something done cheaply. Please pick two. And so we know if you want something that's fast and cheap, that usually is not going to end well, especially if you have a transaction where hundreds of thousands of dollars are on the line. Someone does it for you fast, does it cheap, but in the end, the valuation isn't competent and maybe it derails the loan. Well, really, you just wasted your money. If you want something done well and cheap, that can be done. Some appraisers will pick up work, do a great job cheaply, but they may want a very long lead time. It's kind of like a spare project thing. Fast and good, also possible, but you're going to have to pay a premium. So what do you want to look for? You want to look for an appraiser who regularly appraises ADUs. I appraise ADUs in the Portland, Oregon market. Dennis is a leading expert in the California market. You want to get someone who regularly appraises them, knows the nuances of the market. You also want to get an appraiser that takes continuing education classes on ADUs. Now, Dennis is actually a pioneer in ADU education for appraisers. And prior to him developing some of his courses, I myself was looking around for ADU classes. And so you know what I did? I took broker classes for ADUs. They're out there. So I had to think a little bit outside of the box. In fact, I met a wonderful ADU expert by going to a broker class. I was the only appraiser in the audience, and I took a little heat that day from the brokers in the audience because they were wondering why we appraisers weren't always making the deals work. But I learned a lot, and it allowed me to actually get affiliated with people who are deeply analyzing the market, and it led to me studying the ADU market myself. Now, we often recommend that an appraiser that you use. Now, I want to be careful how I say this because, again, Dennis and I have extreme respect for our colleagues. And we're not saying that an appraiser who is not affiliated with one of these two institutions will do a terrible job analyzing your ADU. We're not saying that. However, if you're looking about for someone to do this, these are just indicators that you might be dealing with someone that's going to give you a higher quality product. Now, the premier appraisal institution organizations, professional organizations would be the Appraisal Institute and the American Society of Appraisers. There are a few others that are certainly reputable, but those are kind of the two 800-pound gorillas, to borrow a Dennis term about the GSEs. They're the 800-pound gorillas in the appraisal space. Most appraisers, sadly, are not affiliated with these professional organizations. I think that's a shame because they do offer a lot for their members, especially in the area of continuing education. But you might want to look for someone that's a member of these institutions. Now, they offer what's known as designations, which is an indication that the person took advanced classes. They had to demonstrate consistency, high quality work over a period of time. And some of the more prominent designations are the MAI. Now, my colleague Dennis, he holds that designation. It's considered by many the premier designation of the appraisal world. The next prestigious, I would say, that's generally known would be the SRA. That's the one that I hold. Now, the difference between the MAI and the SRA is that the MAI are for people that also can value commercial properties like Dennis. I myself, I'm a residential specialist, and so the SRA is the one that I was able to pursue. The ASA is also a comparable designation. The CRE is another one, Counselor of Real Estate, very prestigious and very hard to get, by the way. Now, just like a person having a master's or a bachelor's degree doesn't indicate that they are automatically competent in whatever field you may find them in, it's a good indication that these people have taken a lot more training. I do want to caution you, there are a few institutions out there that offer designations that are little more than mail order diplomas. So the ones that I'm listing here, MAI, SRA, ASA, CRE, those are legitimate ones, respected in the courts, respected throughout the country. Be careful about the ones that do not require an appraiser to actually take classes or spend time. Myself, it varies from appraiser to appraiser, but it took me about 2 years. I took 13 separate classes, had to fly to different locations, took 15 different examinations, had to produce a report that was reviewed, and I had to get grilled by a prominent appraiser who reviewed that report and asked me pointed questions about it. So it took me quite some time to get the SRA, and that's where the value comes in, not necessarily having those letters behind your name, but the process of getting qualified for it. Now, one of the things I'd like to encourage market participants, if you get an appraisal that you don't feel smells right, it doesn't seem right, doesn't smell right, you don't have to necessarily panic. There are things you can do. Read that report, read the narrative comments. Did the appraiser lay a logical foundation? Did they do their best to compare apples to apples? Did they do many of the things that Dennis just talked about can be done to value an ADU? Look at the photos. Zillow and Trulia, in this age where you can access those websites free of charge, you can sometimes see the photos and you can say, this doesn't really quite seem correct as a comp. Let me see if he explained why he included it. If there are some serious concerns, some actual material defects, then you can prepare what's known in the industry as a reconsideration of value. That's a very formal way of asking the appraiser to address some concerns, and perhaps you're offering them some additional facts, and you might be able to get them to change their value opinion on logical data and facts that they may have omitted from their analysis. So the reconsideration of value can be kind of a last-ditch effort to save a transaction that got derailed, and you can legitimately see that the appraiser might have missed something in their evaluation. So that's about it for me. I'm just encouraging all of you to really think about who you get to value the property. There's nothing wrong if you have an AMC getting the appraiser for you, you can pass on to them instructions. Please interview the appraiser and make sure they are competent and well-versed in AD valuation for this transaction. So I think with that, I will just turn it back over to you, Dennis, and maybe we can field any questions that may have come in.
Outstanding. Yeah, great presentation. And again, I joined the course and beat the drum. Competency is the objective. And that goes to the first question we have from Z. Z asks, is the homeowner builder designer allowed to dictate which appraiser we want utilized by the lender for our projects? So I'll give you my answer. Abdur can chime in with his. No, you're not. And there's a regulatory reason for that. The appraisal process is supposed to be independent, impartial, and objective. And it's designed to be separated from the lending part. So we're the collateral value part. They're the lending part. This is an outcome most recently of the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, where there were concerns that the appraiser and the loan agent or lender were working more in concert to advocate for the closing of the loan rather than to provide a credible valuation. Having said that, what you can do is, because you're a stakeholder in the process, and while you cannot say, hey, I want you to use Joe Schmo here, what you can do is you can make it loud and clear that, I have a property here, it's got an ADU. Every place that I've gone and looked up ADU financing, the concern has always been, is the appraiser competent? I've gone to a presentation and the appraisers themselves are saying, make sure you get a competent appraiser. So I'm requesting that you select somebody that you've confirmed has experience and training in the ADU. The other thing that you can do is, to your loan officer or loan broker, however you're working, give them the package. If you got plans, if you got a budget, if you're going to rent and you got a property management team set up, if you figured out the rents that you want to charge, if you know of sales in the neighborhood with ADUs, put that all in a package, give it to the lender. And I also recommend handing the package to the appraiser when they show up. Some appraisers are a little hinky. They don't like to get in a conversation directly with a homeowner or a borrower. They're concerned that they may say something that's inappropriate. We're not supposed to discuss the value. Yeah, I think your house is worth $500,000. I'm never supposed to say that when I'm out there. Because you're going to run with it. Oh, the guy said it was worth 500,000, and then I'm going to come in at 450, and it's going to cause nothing but problems. But you can talk to the appraiser, and the appraiser can talk to you. Oh, you got some information here? Great. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll check it out. So if you do those two things, demand qualified, competent appraisers through your loan broker or loan officer, and then have packaged information to hand it over to the appraiser, I think you've done about as much as you can do. What do you think, Abdur?
I agree. I think you mentioned some good points. The only thing that I could think of, and this is kind of a break glass in case of emergency situation where you really need to go with this lender and you really want this deal to go through and you're convinced that there's a material defect. What you can do, and this is a bit unusual, but it would be admissible, you could hire a competent appraiser to do an appraisal on your property. And then you could actually submit that appraisal that you've gotten from that competent appraiser to that lender and say, I know you cannot use this as the basis for the loan, but this appraisal brings up some extremely good points as to why my home is worth this. And the lender can look at that, perhaps, and they can actually maybe see some comps that Dennis mentioned that, hey, this other appraiser found 3 comparables that seem reasonable. Why weren't these sales included in the property? So you might be able to send them the appraisal or a summary of the salient points of that appraisal, but sometimes you can get another appraiser that you hire to maybe bring material information that can then be shared with the lender that could find its way back to the original appraiser. And then perhaps with this new data, maybe they're not going to send the appraisal, of course, to that other appraiser, but maybe they would send some salient points that could get that other appraiser to perhaps reconsider their value a bit more. That's a very seldom done thing. So I'm not saying that that's the best solution, but I mean, if you're absolutely certain something is wrong there, that's a possibility. Kind of a long shot, though, I will admit. Oh, I think you're still muted, Dennis.
Next question is, can a review appraisal be requested? So I happen to be a reviewer. I work for a couple of community banks, and our banks routinely review the appraisal. Now, sometimes a situation will come up where we will be looking at something, and on the initial review, okay, it looks okay, and it goes through. But the borrower will come back with some additional information. Sometimes if there's factual discrepancies, because we wouldn't know that on review. We would assume that the appraisal is reporting accurately what exists. But if there's factual errors or there's some additional data, sometimes it comes back to us again for a review. The primary method would be to get the original appraiser to reconsider. The secondary method is for the lender to go through the review process. Many times, if the lender goes through the review process and they find that the original appraisal was not credible, then they will reject the original appraisal, but they might order a new appraisal. My suggestion in that case is, if they reject an appraisal, that they pay for the replacement. It's their responsibility to ensure that the appraisals that they use, you pay for the first one, they select the appraisal, it doesn't pass muster, you need another one, they should pay for that second appraisal. And I'd fight that one if I was everybody. But I work for a bank. So that's my opinion.
And Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, in certain cases like PMI removal, the lenders may often allow the borrower to select their own appraiser. So if you're in a situation where they'll permit that, by all means, hunt for the best appraiser to do the job if you have an ADU on the property.
Absolutely. PMI removal. That's I didn't even think about that. That's a great example. So I go out and get it. I might have PMI on my house, and now I get an ADU. And depending on how I finance it, it's safe to assume my house is going to be worth more, and I should be able to get out of my PMI. PMI is a one example, and it's a rare one where the borrower can engage the appraiser, because PMI is set up a little differently, right? I need to get PMI because I didn't meet, usually it's a 20% down requirement. The lender is required to audit my loan, and at the point where it gets below 80% based on my mortgage payments, they automatically remove the PMI. What they're not required to do is revalue your property to see if it's appreciated in order to get rid of the PMI. But you have that right as a homeowner, borrower. So as the borrower, that's one example where you can directly engage the appraiser. And boy, I didn't even think about that. I built an ADU, I got PMI. What's wrong with you guys? I want this thing gone.
And just to let you know, Dennis, we're coming up on 2-minute warning. So if you have any final thoughts or observations.
It's an exciting time to be a lender, a developer, or an appraiser that is focusing in on ADUs. Where we are at now is not where we're going to be in 2 years. And I would expect some significant changes, almost all for the good, but it may be a little rough road getting there. So, excited, I say.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree.
Thank you so much, Dennis and Abdur, for your lovely presentations. We learned a lot. I had the pleasure of taking one of Dennis's courses in April, and it was chock full of information just like this one. So thank you so much for participating today and yesterday, Abdur. We learned a lot, and so we really, really do thank you so much. I do have a couple of announcements. One is that if you didn't hear, our next session has been canceled. So what we're doing is having a virtual meetup at 3:40. You can get to that through the Hoover app in their community area. And overall, we just had a great 2 days. We learned a lot, and we're so grateful to all of our speakers and our sponsors. We also wanted to let you know that DCLT is in the process of fundraising for our first CLT plus one home. And so we want to do some pre-development work on about 4 properties that, you know, we have identified that we can put a land trust home in an ADU. So that'll be up and in some communications as well. If you want to support us in that pre-development work, we have some demolition to do and lot clearing and all that A&E. So we just appreciate all of you for attending. Thank you so much. And perhaps I will see you at 3:40. Have a great day, everyone.